Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Vantage Points. I'm Hisham Al Miligi here with my co host for this series, Davi Barker. Hey, Davi,
Walaikum salam.
how are you?
Welcome to the show, everybody who's with us again.
Yep. Welcome and thank you. I know we're doing this new thing, it came as a spur of the moment on the weekend. Decided, you know what? Let's do a live every day until election day. Something like the cable news coverage thing too. But
hmm
of course, we're still learning and we're getting there. Last night episode was awesome. We had the Care New York executive director Afaf Nashir and the Care New York legal director Ahmed Mohammed. I think it was an awesome discussion and a lot of information came out. What did you think?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's always good to hear from CARE and what they've got going. They actually brought up a topic that I had never heard of before, and I followed CARE pretty closely. I'd never heard of banking while Muslim as a problem, but the idea that a bank would just be like suspicious name, close the account, like
Um,
that.
um,
That I'd never seen before, but it's apparently become serious enough that there's a lawsuit about it. So
there is.
there you go.
I'm intimately aware of the case because the plaintiff is a friend of mine. Um,
Oh, okay. Well, can you tell us more about it?
well, how much you pay? Anyway, no, I'm kidding.
I guess how much is your friend okay with us talking about on the air?
Exactly. I'm going to say what I think is safe to say, so not to jeopardize anything. And I'm not going to mention the person. So suffice to say that the person is a convert, American white convert, who went to the
Mhm.
bank to open an account. Um, and then the bank requested who would be next of kin or someone that you want to, in case of you're unable to access, who else do you want to have their name on
Yeah,
the account?
it's like a medical proxy kind of stuff, only for
Right,
banks.
something similar. So that person decided to give the name of their spouse, and the spouse is an immigrant from an Arab country with
Okay.
what came to be known as a foreign sounding name. Okay.
Right. Right.
At this
Which in
moment,
many circles just means a name.
exactly. But at this moment, the bank employee said, okay, we're going to have to do some more investigation, blah, 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 whatever it is. We're not going to open the account right away. Something to that
Just because
effect.
of the name.
That's what triggered the bank or the employee response. So, of course, they say this is policy and we have to follow, blah, 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 but that's garbage. If that's a
Well, then it's
policy,
happening to more people.
exactly. Exactly. So, anyway, so yeah, so that's the case. And I'm sure
Now, is
it's,
there some kind of an amazing coincidence here where the person had the same name as an actual suspicious person, or is it just like an Arab name?
as a matter of fact, I looked on the Treasury Department lists of names of suspects or those who you don't interact with financially overseas, blah, blah, blah. And none of that happened.
Okay.
Did not appear. So it's basically straight, flat out. If you feel that there is suspicion, then do more
Don't get
investigation.
it,
Okay,
the account.
but leaving it up to the whims and the biases internally, forget even about overt biases, internal biases
Yeah.
that you're not even aware of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Well, I mean, like, what other ethnicity would trigger such extra investigation? If the person was named Pierre, would they say that sounds like a foreign name? Like,
you see
like,
that's the thing. Yeah. So hopefully this case leads to less profiling and less discrimination against
yeah.
Muslims and Arabs and others.
Well,
So yeah.
great. I
Yeah.
mean, if we want to talk election coverage, I don't know if you saw it today. I think it was today. At least the channel said that it was live. Trump had a rally in Arizona
Uh-huh.
today that I watched. Uh, nothing particularly new was said, although he said a bunch of stuff about someone named Anonymous. And I think that this was his attempt to say, I think he was talking about QAnon,
I
but
think
he
so.
kept saying this person named Anonymous. So those statements are probably worth reviewing again. But the thing that was interesting to me was that Rand Paul was there, and Rand Paul got up and basically endorsed Donald Trump.
Interesting.
And for me, that's incredibly disappointing because the explicit reason he gave for endorsing Donald Trump was that Donald Trump was the only candidate who understood the folly of American foreign policy and understood that perpetual war was bad for the nation or whatever. And nothing Donald Trump has done tells me that he actually thinks that, but like maybe a lot of people do think that. But the thing that gets me is like to some extent, like Rand Paul is holding the mantle of Ron Paul. To some extent, Ron Paul is responsible for the huge like uptick in the liberty movement we've seen in the last decade.
Right.
And it's not just about Rand Paul. Like Rand Paul has never really struck me as particularly good on a lot of things, but it's that he is one of many people, both publicly and privately in my life, who at one point I would have thought was a more principled libertarian and
Mhm.
is now like jumping behind Donald Trump, who like has all of the affectation of an actual literal fascist. And I don't know what to make of that cultural shift or that movement. Like, have you witnessed this phenomenon too? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, Rand, the son, Rand Paul,
Uh
uh,
huh.
is not the same as his father. Despite all his father's problems, Rand is worse. Let me just say this first.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Paul, when I first heard about him in the 2008 elections, starting from 2006,
Yeah, same for me.
because most, I mean, we're Muslim, so most of us were under the fear and the oppression and suppression of the post 9/11 atmosphere. It was very strong, and it's still in many ways. But at the time, we were scrambling for any voice of sanity. So,
Yeah. The Bush era was straight up scary, and that's even speaking as a convert who, like I said yesterday, can disappear. Like,
right,
like,
right,
like it was a scary time.
right. So, in this case, when I first heard a Republican and Ron, the father, was running for president as a Republican,
Hmm.
speaking anti-war, economic justice, and all the stuff, and I started, is it really true? So I am not right in assuming that Republican equals bad and Democrat equals angel, you know. So anyway,
Yeah, I've never thought that.
so I mean, without the experience and the benefit of looking into the history and the system and the politics of, like, most people think that Republicans want to take away their rights and their income and their health care and this and that, and Democrats wants to give it to them. They have no grasp, most people, of where you get the funding for this, who decides, and if you give the government that much power, then couldn't the government abuse? And we've seen the abuse over the years. But anyway, I'm saying all this to say that the reason I evolved politically and started reading and looking into history, economics, politics, and everything is Ron Paul, the father. He's the one who pulled me into thinking, okay, there is no one size fits all. There is no black and white, like these are bad and those are good. So, anyway, he's the reason I went into the so called liberty movement. Now, he has his problems and he has his positions. His position on immigration, for example, is not
There's always
optimal, you know. So, but anyway, so Rand, the son, is even worse. He's more militaristic.
Mhm.
And I remember the comedian.
Pro domestic droning. Like he made some statements, Rand Paul did, that sounded like he was okay with local law enforcement having weaponized drones.
Amazing. It's just amazing. Like, the comedian Jeremy McClellan, who I had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, we together, me and you, were at Liberty Con in, I think, 2015 or 2016. So anyway, Jeremy was performing there, and I remember him saying on stage, I'm sorry that Rand Paul couldn't be with us today in person or in principle. You know, Rand Paul positions are not liberty. I mean, he has some liberty positions, but overall, he's more militaristic, more conservative than any or most libertarians. And unfortunately,
he is squarely a Republican. He might be part of some sort of like Republican Liberty Caucus or something like that.
Right.
And he probably appeals to liberty-minded Republicans who see the Libertarian Party as an unviable alternative. But he still had the attention of the liberty movement. Like when people look around for politicians that they think are actually in any position of power that might hold some, like they look to like Justin Amash and they look to Rand Paul, and there just aren't very many others. And so he was one of those.
Right.
But he seems to have gone full tilt authoritarian if he's willing to endorse Donald Trump in a speech where Donald Trump literally like celebrated the use of federal troops to put down protest movements in the United States against the wishes of the governors and mayors of those cities. Like he bragged about that.
Right.
And it's like that's really authoritarian.
Right. And here's the thing. Is it in Rand Paul's mind that this is a soft revolution and like all bets are off, or Rand Paul is playing the libertarian role? Because like when actually there was a tweet by Trump a few days ago saying, "Thank you, libertarians," and quoting a tweet from Rand Paul.
Okay.
The guy is a Republican senator.
For what?
So this is the confusion.
This is another phenomenon that's gone on in the last few years, and that is people co-opting the term libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get these Republicans who say that they're libertarian, and they don't really have any idea what that means.
Exactly.
It might just mean that they don't care so much about the social issues, but they don't have any sense of the principles involved or the philosophy involved, or they don't know why they came to those conclusions. They're just like Republican light. And so they say it because I think they just say it because it became popular media figures to come out and say that they're libertarian leaning or that they're libertarian.
They're more libertarian when it comes to economics. They want more liberty to use their money as they wish. They don't want the government to tax them. That's the libertarian streak in them. But when it comes to the First Amendment, when it comes to healthcare, none of this. They want to impose their will on everyone, just like the lefties and the Democrats want to. So Rand Paul cannot be used as an example for libertarianism. He's not.
Right. But he is like the spearhead of this body of people from the liberty movement who have migrated to the right.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're like they call it the libertarian Republican pipeline, or the libertarian conservative pipeline.
Yeah.
Like there's this weird shift that has happened where people like forgot the things that they knew 5 years ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I don't know why, because like in a lot of these cases, it's the people that taught me. You know what I mean? like the people that I listened to 5-10 years ago when I was getting into the libertarian movement initially and learning the philosophy myself, they're the ones who told me why these things are bad. And now they're espousing them and I'm the one saying, "But I thought we agreed those were bad."
Yeah, exactly. It's been sad seeing the transformation of people who were close to you, friends and everything, and supporting of the rights of everyone because of Trump and the Trump run and the presidency, complete 180 on rights. It amazes me, and it's all usually most of the time it's more anti-left than pro something.
Yeah, it's about owning the libs. And that was a lot of his rally today too. He spent a good 20 minutes just being like, and we won in Pennsylvania, and we won in Texas, and we won in Alabama. It was just long list of we won, we won, we won. And I don't even know what he was saying that he won. Like, I guess he won a poll, or maybe he was talking about winning. Maybe he won in that state in 2016. I'm not really sure what he was saying he won, but everyone cheered. We won, America, USA. And it's like, what have we won?
My brain cells are dying as I'm listening to that. It's amazing. Let me ask you a question. Election wise, do you know if someone requested an absentee ballot, if they decide that they're not going to use that ballot, can they go and vote at the polls? Do you have any idea?
I think so. The only reason that I think that that's okay is because I heard two people on YouTube, full disclosure, I heard two YouTube personalities debating whether or not voter fraud or voter suppression was a problem. And one of them brought that up.
Mhm.
And the other person said that that's perfectly fine as long as they didn't also mail in their ballot. That they corroborate and they discount one of them.
So
But,
the
but I
question,
don't know for sure.
because that's exactly what I'm driving at. What prevents someone from abusing the system, voting twice, once absentee and once in person?
Well, I assume that that's part of what the certification process is on these ballots. That you, because they are associated with your name, aren't they? Like,
Right.
there's, to some extent, it's a matter of public record. So I assume that if it comes up twice, that's a problem.
But the thing is, like, okay, so I have the absentee ballot. Let's say that I want to abuse the system. Of course, I don't. But I have my absentee ready and I go vote in person. I say, I'm not going to do absentee, and then finish voting in person and go drop it in the mail.
I would hope that there would be a system in place to catch that you had voted twice.
I hope so too.
Your social security number, whatever you're using to identify yourself at the poll.
Well, in
But I
New
don't know
York,
for sure.
yeah, in New York, you don't need an ID per se.
But you have to give a name.
Right, right. So, do they remove, for example, the name of the absentee requesters from the polling locations? I don't know. I'm going to find out. We'll see. That's an important question because
Yeah.
Trump, in particular, will use that or like to drag the thing for
Well, I mean,
months.
there's it's an interesting question because there's all sorts of funny little things that could be done to spoil a particular ballot. Like, I watched a John Oliver, I guess, presentation on something that was happening where mail-in ballots were being disqualified because the signature didn't appear to match the signature on record.
Right.
Because people often just scribble something, and depending on how much you're going to scrutinize that signature, it might not look like the signature on. I mean, I sign differently all the time, like, especially if I'm at the grocery store, if it's an electronic signature, like, that's not legible at all. And so there were a lot of people whose ballots were disqualified without telling them because they didn't take the signature seriously enough. And so there's things like that. I also know of one person, and this is voter fraud, and I'm kind of upset with this person about this, but he likes to take a stance that he's this, like, principled non-voter, But what he did instead was he went down to the ballot with his buddy who was a Trump supporter. He told the ballot, the polling people, that he was mentally deficient and needed help voting, and he let the other guy vote for him. So that's something that happens.
Yeah.
It's still one person, one vote, but had that not happened, that person wouldn't have voted at all. And he did this because he wanted to go around and continue saying that he didn't vote for Donald Trump, which
Right.
I guess technically didn't. This other guy voted for Donald Trump twice.
Right.
But so like obviously there's no perfect system. Like I wouldn't mind seeing a sort of study or analysis of how serious all of these little things are. But these elections are not won and lost by small margins either.
Right.
So, and as long as you have an electoral college, there's a sense in which the popular vote doesn't matter at all because the electoral college can technically vote against the popular vote if they want to.
Yes.
So, so there's a sense in which it still doesn't matter. But that's not. It's like at what point if you acknowledge that it's a system where it's impossible to be 100% accurate with 0% failure rate for disqualifying ballots, at what point does it become a threat to the democratic process? Like for me, the big example is 2000 with George W. Bush and Al Gore and all of the pregnant Chads and all the analysis of like, well, did this person intend to poke this little piece of paper and poke it wrong, or did they not poke it hard enough, and does that count? And it suddenly becomes the decision making of the analyst or the certifying body, not necessarily the voters themselves when it's a close race.
Right.
So I guess it's what margin of error is acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. What's too close, But let me switch gears for a bit to Georgia, where you are. And today I heard that the two Senate races are too close in Georgia, and they might go on a runoff. Is that accurate?
I haven't read anything about that.
Okay.
But I know that just as far as polling is concerned, Georgia is a swing state for the first time in a long time. Like Georgia is historically Republican safe ground, and now they're polling really close to 50-50.
Wow.
And I attribute that to a large extent to the successes of the Black Lives Matter movement and the Democratic efforts to collaborate with them, because it's this sort of groundswell of left-leaning people who are coming out more in numbers than ever before. Or maybe it's even people who've switched sides. I don't know. But suddenly Georgia is a swing state, and so that's a big deal.
Very interesting.
And so it would not surprise me at all if in the presidential election polls, suddenly it's 50-50, that you would see a similar close margin in the Senate races.
Right. That's very important. I'm trying to get something to share here. The current like swing states are Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, Arizona, Wisconsin, Iowa, mostly Midwest, with Florida being the southern one. And as more and more we get closer, it seems, as you said, like other states like Georgia are joining the swing state thing. But the interesting thing about Michigan, maybe this is good to mention now, in the 2016 primaries, Democratic primaries, Bernie Sanders pulled an amazing upset against Hillary Clinton when he won the primary in Michigan, and it was attributed to the Muslim vote, Arab and Muslim vote, especially in the areas of Detroit and Dearborn and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge population there.
Right. So you have now in this year, Trump, I believe, won Georgia last time in Michigan in 2016. So now we'll see how the Muslim vote plays with other, of course, because do you think that this year will have more voters than previous years?
Man, there's a lot of reasons to say yes and no. So
Right.
if all things were equal and there wasn't a pandemic, I would say yes. I would
Okay.
say people are more passionate about this election than previous elections. It seems more dire to more people for more reasons this
Hmm.
election, and that people would turn out more. Now, because of the pandemic, you're going to have people who are making a little, a personal risk calculation, and they're going to say, I don't want to go down to the polls. I would rather vote by mail. And
Mm.
so we're definitely going to see a massive increase in mail in ballots and probably a decrease in physical walk in ballots.
Right.
Uh, I don't know whether or not that chilling effect will be large enough to offset the increased passion about the election itself. It might be that there are enough people who say, I'm not going to vote because of the pandemic and mail in ballot seems like complicated or whatever, and so I'm not going to vote at all. Like added difficulty, added bureaucracy, added hurdles also means some percentage of non-compliance.
Mm.
So like just mathematically, if you put up a hurdle and you even a small one, there's some percentage of people who don't get over the hurdle.
Right.
And so there's definitely going to be a decrease in total voter turnout because of the pandemic, or at least it would have a decreasing effect.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, as you said, I'm like a pendulum going back and forth. There's going to be more. There's going to be less, depending on many factors.
I think that the primaries were up. I think that both parties, these primaries, saw more participation than previous elections, and that if that's any indication, it would mean more in the general also.
Right. Newsweek reported yesterday that over 70 million people already voted.
Hmm.
So that, I don't think that was the case in the previous few elections.
Right, but that's the increase in mail-in ballots.
Right. 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 Well, right. Yes,
Now
I
you
see your
can.
point. I see your point. Yeah. So anyway, um, today, as you viewers, as you can see, this is a free discussion. We don't have outside guests tonight. We just wanted to chat and see where things are. Uh, so, what do you think about the Muslim view of this election?
Oh man, uh, I think to some extent, prejudice against Muslims is kind of a deal breaker for Muslims, right? Like in 2000, was it 2000? I think it was 2000. Muslims largely turned out for George W. Bush
Right.
because they were by and large social conservatives, economic conservatives. Most Muslims at the time were Republican.
Right.
And then in 2004, just dramatic reversal. And it's like his policies didn't change a whole lot.
Hmm.
I mean, the war, so there's suddenly the war on terror, and suddenly Muslims are feeling targeted,
Right.
and then suddenly the other party was making friends with them,
Right.
and so like despite the like by and large policy disagreements between the parties on like economics and stuff, Muslims swung hard to the left uh,
Hmm.
because of because of prejudice, because they felt targeted. And so I think probably in 2016 we didn't have a Muslim ban yet. I don't remember any particular gaffe about Trump
Hmm.
being against Muslims in any particular way. He sort of spoke like someone who was going to maybe end the wars. I just didn't believe him.
Right.
Uh, and so it was sort of like George W. Bush. He was promising a more humble foreign policy. Um, but now I just don't think that's the case at all. I think Trump has really revealed himself as kind of a bigot in almost every department. Like bigotry kind of just seems like his default in every category. I don't know if there's anything about Joe Biden that mitigates that. Like Biden hasn't done anything in particular to reach out to Muslims that I'm aware of. I don't know of anything other than being in the Obama administration that would have alienated Muslims.
Right.
Uh, so if it's just up and down, who seems to be friendlier? I would say they would probably lean toward Biden. If it was about policy itself, it seems like foreign policy is not really on the table, and that seems like one of Muslims' major issues. Immigration is on the table, and in that sense, they would go towards Biden as a policy procedure. Like he seems like the one who will be most accommodating of them in, like immigrating family members, or make it easier for them to visit other countries or things like that. Trump is obviously hostile on immigration.
Yeah.
What other? Well, I mean, what are the other pivotal issues for Muslims other than regular domestic economic stuff?
I think we're busy staying alive.
Yeah, I mean, as far as demographics are concerned, there are many Muslim. There are more Muslim doctors per capita than other religious groups.
Yes.
Doctors tend to be in favor of something like an Obamacare or something like a healthcare for all thing, and so there might be an incidental correlation in that sense in the healthcare debate where Muslims might lean that way. What about environmental stuff? Where I have no sense of this. Do you have a sense of where Muslims land on global warming or things like that?
My experience, so two things. There is an organization called Green Deen or Green Faith, I forgot, where Muslims are heavily involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
But Muslims basically rode the left Democrat bandwagon. And that's my main problem with how we approach politics as American Muslims. We have, based on our teachings, certain principles that we should not compromise on. It seems that these go out of the window just because Trump says bad things. This
Yeah,
is an oversimplification, of course, and there is more damage that Trump does, but still, like, why is it that we cannot form, after all these years now, a political understanding, a political principles to this is what we can work with you on, and other stuff we can't. I'm talking
yeah,
about with the Democrats, but it seems that Muslims majority just ride the left bandwagon, and like we end up with a Biden campaign, for example, shunning Linda Sarsour, and it's not about Linda per se; it's about all of us.
mm-hmm.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So yeah, I mean that's one of my major issues with how we approach politics, and I mentioned this on the Muzzy Buzz podcast. Um, we have now that we have three congresspersons: Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Andre Carson. These are Muslim congresspeople. We have Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Okay, now that we proved that Muslims are normal people and they can be in elected office and the sky wouldn't fall and everything, isn't it time to take a step or take a breath and rethink about how do we approach these things? What is the value of having a Muslim elected official if nothing is left from that Muslim identity principle mix?
yeah. It's like if you analyze the success of those candidates, and I don't know the answer to this question, but to what extent were they electable because they made the compromises you're talking about? Because they pulled a party line. Yeah, you're kind of talking about some sort of like forming a Muslim American political action committee or something, where it's like we have our own platform that will be parts of the Republican platform and parts of the Democratic platform. And
Which is similar to the evangelical community, for example.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
we'll work with you on these issues. Although there is hypocrisy from evangelicals and from others, from Muslims and everybody, but at least it's it's our duty to think of our participation and what we can participate in and what we can't. Of course, the issues, for example, when it comes to Palestine in particular, one of the hot topic issues. We know that both parties are. It's like a turnkey. They are not going to
Yeah, I
take.
mean that's why Linda Sarsour is sort of persona non grata, is because that's she's a bulldog on that issue.
Right.
And so if they're not willing to have that conversation, then they don't want to work with her on other issues.
I mean, Bernie is a different example, and he set he raised the bar actually on this by even mentioning that Palestinians are human beings and deserving of equal rights, and that's why most Muslims were supporting Bernie, the only Jew who had a chance to become president of the United States so far.
Sure. Yeah,
But
I mean, to some extent, this is what Muslim organizations are for. Like the thing that comes to mind is AMP, American Muslims for Palestine,
mhm,
and that is their issue. Obviously, they're not about helping Palestine directly per se. They're about changing American perception and policy toward Palestine internally. So how can American Muslims participate in America to
right,
change America's effect on Israel and Palestine, as opposed to direct aid, right?
right,
So they have one issue, or at least they have a theme of the issues that they'll tackle,
right,
and they'll work with people who are willing to come along on that issue, but they're not going to get engrossed in whatever the popular topic of the day is. They're not going to get engrossed in like who the Supreme Court nominee is. At least I don't think.
right.
And so there is a sense in which Muslim organizations do that. They have particular issues that are important to them, and they work in that department almost exclusively.
No, I agree with that from the organizational level, but my issue is with the lay Muslim or even the activist or leader level, their participation with the Democratic Party in particular. Forget about the Republicans. To me, that party needs to just be abolished. But of course, if people choose to, I'm not gonna issue a decision if I'm the decision maker. But
right,
like it's a lost cause. To me, it's a lost cause. I tried. I was registered as a Republican for a few years, trying to fix from within.
Yeah, I think I'm still technically registered as a Republican, just because I never registered as anything else.
Uh-huh.
But that was so that I could vote in the primaries, like because I was a Ron Paul supporter.
Right. So in the primary of 2016, I
didn't vote.
well, I went to do this, and I took a picture of it. I wrote on the primary ballot, "Those are fascists. I cannot in good faith vote for any of them."
Any of them. Yeah.
And I know that this invalidated the ballot, but this is what I needed, and I took a picture of it, and I have it. I can show it to you later.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you're right though. Like this has been the weird thing about the last 4 years, is that the right is just singing and dancing as it skips toward actual totalitarian fascism.
Yeah.
Like, and it's bizarre, and it's way more explicit than I imagined it would be. Like if you compare Donald Trump speaking now to Donald Trump speaking in 2016, it's really different.
Yeah.
Like in 2016, he was just this kind of buffoon who was like, all these politicians are the same. That's why you want to vote for me, because I have towers and billions of dollars. And, and it was like, it seemed as if he like for the longest time, people were just like, is he joking? Is this a joke campaign or a real campaign? And I wasn't really sure for a long time. But now he's like, we're like all about law and order, and we're all about locking them up, and we're all about we're like law and order to the point that we will supplant law and order in order to assert our will over other people. Like that's not law and order. That's not what that is.
It's fascism. That's straight up fascism. And that's why there is no hope, in my view, in the current Republican Party. It's not gonna.
But it's even granularly, it's like fascism. Like his thing about he doesn't believe the polls because he has his own polls, and his polls say that he's winning. Like, that sounds ridiculous, but that is a systemic problem in any authoritarian system, that
Right,
the people around the dictator lie to the dictator because they know if they give him news he doesn't like, he might have them fired. That
right.
was a problem Hitler faced. That was a problem Mussolini faced. That's a problem authoritarian corporate CEOs face now. That's a problem with authoritarian structures. And that's what he's got going on. He's got a
Right.
cadre of people around him who are lying to him about what's going on in the real world.
Which makes me wonder if those authoritarian examples that you mentioned were all uh, like with flaws as personality wise similar to Trump, not necessarily as the case of Trump, but like could someone
Yeah.
be that authoritarian without mental or psychological whatever flaws?
Well, I mean, there's probably a psychological profile that fits it.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there's certainly a love of oration. There's certainly a obsession with physical or personal appearance. There's certainly uh, an unwillingness to face honest criticism.
Mm,
There's a sort of pathological narcissism that fits the personality type. And I think it's an interesting question. If you had an authoritarian system, but you put in a leader who didn't have this personality trait,
mm.
what happens?
Right, right, right.
Like, I
Maybe
don't know. It seems like they always go together.
maybe we get Omar ibn Abdulaziz to fix the system. Anyway, what else? Uh, so on election night, just a reminder to everybody if you're watching, uh, we're going to be covering from 8 p.m. Eastern up until about midnight Eastern, or until we fall asleep, either of us.
I
So,
mean, I'm down to stay up. I'm a night owl as it is. So
you are okay, good. I'm getting old, so I'm not as I don't stay up that much anymore. But we'll try, and hopefully we'll work out the system on StreamYard here, so we can share screens from news outlets and stuff like that, so we can have results on the screen. And we're
yeah, we
gonna
can ticker tape some statistics and things. That'd be cool.
right, right, right.
Roll in.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
fill-in map.
exactly, yeah, yeah. Or maybe we can do our own.
I mean, if I could get in a position where I had Photoshop going on the side, I could probably paint fill states as they fill in and like change my background to be the current. I mean, it'd be sloppy,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
could probably technically do it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, at least we're not gonna use breaking news 17,000 times like CNN does.
Yeah, that was the weird thing. So back to the anonymous thing,
Hmm.
like he said. So there was this person named Anonymous that people thought worked in the White House, and he said that now the guy is defunct and working for CNN. And I'm like, really? Like, if we're talking about QAnon, do they know who that was? Does QAnon really work for CNN? Like, I want to get into like the fact checking of this rally speech. It was only like an hour ago, so I haven't had time to look into it.
Hmm.
But like, he was saying some weird things.
Is
Um,
is it weird that he's saying weird things? If he doesn't, we're
well,
gonna be afraid.
I think he's counting on the QAnon vote. Like I think he thinks they're going to tip it over, all the Q followers. So if he denounces them now, I don't know. Maybe it was code. Maybe it was all code. Maybe that was his way.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of code,
No.
but we started talking about if Trump, especially with Rand Paul endorsing him, and how could Rand Paul do something like that. Let's talk about Trump's approach to foreign policy. He did
Okay.
not start new wars,
He almost did.
almost, but he did not.
Yeah. Because of the restraint of the Iranian regime, we are not currently at war with Iran.
I agree. Because it wasn't up to Trump if the Iranians responded
Yeah,
hostile, I mean, and they had the right to.
they responded very cautiously, and I think that that is the reason why that didn't continue to escalate.
Right. It would have went out of hand, and it's not even up to Trump. The military had to take control and start over. But anyway, so he did not start a new war. Obama started Libya and
Yeah.
what else? I forgot. But I mean, Yemen started under his watch, and he
Hmm.
funded and fueled and whatever the Saudis and the Emiratis.
Well, Trump armed Saudi Arabia. I guess that's not a new war, right? He's just
Yes,
continuing existing
it's
wars.
continuation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from that sense alone, and mind you, so the Russia Gate thing, they say he's Putin's lapdog, his this and that. That's really oversimplification of things. But regardless of his intention and the reason he's doing it for, isn't isn't he lowering the tensions with Russia? And look at it this way: any military creed is built on the perceived enemy. So now it has been, and it's still, Russia is the number one enemy. Yes, there's China, there's this and that, but Russia is the second most powerful military, and it is the designated enemy that the military creed is built upon. Okay.
Okay.
If you lower tensions with Russia, what does that mean? That means potentially less weapons, and therefore the military industrial complex lose a source of its income.
Some of its contracts would decrease.
And you follow the money and go into the rabbit hole, and you can see why he would be attacked for lowering tensions with Russia.
Because so many media outlets are controlled to some extent by, or at least funded by, military firms.
Military industrial complex, yes.
It's
Yes.
woven into the finances of their
Right.
coverage.
And mind you, the military budget is $700 billion, more than half of the US budget. It's more than the next 15 countries
That,
or 12 countries combined in military spending. And that includes Russia and China. you know, so
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, what so I heard this years ago, and I don't know how true this is, but this is something that a Lockheed Martin employee told me. He said that there is a sense in which Lockheed Martin is holding the U.S. government over a barrel, because what they do, and what apparently this person claims many military contractors do, is they say to the government, we're going to manufacture this many bombs a year. You're free to buy as many of them as you want. Whatever you don't buy, we'll sell somewhere else.
hmm,
And so in that sense, like, the contract, if that's true, and I don't know, this was just one employee told me this, but if that's true, then the contractors don't lose money if the U.S. stops buying bombs. They just sell the bombs to someone else.
that's very interesting. It raised the question in my mind. Assuming that the US government has control, let's assume that for a second. Why would a weapons manufacturer produce weapons that the US government is not sanctioning? I understand free market and everything, but in bombs also?
It's the same as planned obsolescence for light bulbs. It's because if somebody's not detonating those bombs, then the market dries up.
Hmm.
Like, so let's say, for example, the United States reduces its military budget and they stop buying as many bombs, and the military contractors say, well, we're not going to let our profit margins go down, so we're going to start selling our bombs to somewhere else. They're still invested in, if the United States is not going to blow these things up, they still want someone else to blow them up, right?
Exactly.
Because that's how it's that you want light bulbs to burn out, so people buy more light bulbs.
that's probably the clearest example of the control of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah. So I guess it's that the U.S. wants to be in control of where those bombs are going off and against whom.
Hmm.
Whereas if the U.S. allows the contractors to sell them to another country, then that country becomes the one who decides where they go off,
Hmm.
which is sort of like this might be what's gone on in Saudi Arabia,
Right.
that it's become acceptable to sell arms to Saudi Arabia because they think they have a pretty good idea who Saudi Arabia is going to use them against, and
Right.
that's Yemen. But if they thought, for example, that Saudi Arabia was going to use them against Israel, then I guarantee you that would not be a weapons deal the U.S. would be involved in.
Right. Right.
So
This is
I don't
really
know. It's a tangled web, you know.
right, but it's a great example of the real power on who's in control. Like
Yeah,
this it hasn't been more clear to me than now. Like okay, I understood corporations and weapons manufacturers and this and that buy and sell politicians and blah blah blah. But yeah, it's clear as day now. This is what motivates these companies. Production is basically more more bombs or more wars equals more money. Straight.
yeah.
Amazing.
It keeps them in business. It keeps their assembly lines running. It always struck me as strange. Like why can't a company just like I realized it would take some initial investment, but why couldn't a company just change its modes of production? You know what I mean? Like a car company can decide to transition from gasoline to electric. Like why can't a weapons manufacturer decide to transition from nuclear weapons to nuclear power plants or something like that?
Right.
Like you could keep your profits up by providing something people actually wanted.
Right.
Doesn't
Right.
seem like a really efficient market strategy to invent the marketplace and insist on selling to it.
Right. Right. I mean, when it comes to, I don't know, Lockheed Martin, for example, what do they do other than weapons?
Missiles in space.
Okay,
That's what
but
they
when
say.
you come to Boeing, Boeing does the commercial airline fly jets
Yeah.
and the drones.
Well, this is something really interesting about Lockheed. This is again from this employee. I don't know how true it is, but Lockheed Missiles in Space does missiles and they do space. So sometimes you're working on a warhead of some kind, and sometimes you're working on the Hubble telescope or some other satellite or something like that. And this is reminiscent of old school firing squads. It used to be if you put someone against the wall for a firing squad and you had, three people standing there to fire, one of them had a blank and two of them had live rounds.
Right.
The reason for that was they discovered after having executed so many people that if everybody had live rounds, people tended to fire up. They tended to not fire at the target. And
Mm.
so by letting them believe maybe I'm the guy with the blank, people were more likely to actually shoot the person.
Wow.
Lockheed Martin does this with their employees. They compartmentalize all of the components so that the engineer working on the particular component doesn't know whether he's working on a missile or a satellite.
Wow. Wow. That's very interesting. That and that makes sense because the
He
conscious.
wants the engineer wants to believe that he's working on a satellite.
Right. 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 That's amazing point. Right. Wow. Well, I'm glad I have you as my co-host for this series, and looking forward to you splitting and having your own show under the Vantage Points channel.
Yeah, maybe we'll get there. I'll
Yes.
work on the studio.
No, it's getting better. It's getting better.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Alrighty, tomorrow we have, inshallah, Dr. Yusuf Shuhud, Professor Yusuf Shuhud, political science professor. He's going to talk to us about the Muslim voter numbers in different states and the power of Muslim votes. And we also have our sister Darakshan Raja from the Muslim Justice Initiative. She's going to talk about her experience and activism within the Muslim community and the elections and the riots and everything. So it's going to be a very interesting show. Looking forward to tomorrow. We're going to end up 5 minutes early today because we took 5 minutes more yesterday. But very interesting discussion. We came up with you came up with two very good pieces of information. Probably we're gonna cut them and use them as nuggets.
Make little
Inshallah.
promo videos.
Yes,
Sure.
inshallah. All right, Davi. Jazakallah khair. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody. Take care. Tomorrow, 8 p.m.